Okay, we'll now move to the substantive part of today's thing, the adoption of consultation material for the annual budget. This has been a tough time for Auckland, not to mention the rest of the North Island, from Northland down to beyond Gisborne, Wairau. We have learned a lot, myself included. We have to focus on the safety and welfare of our people first, then focus on those things that are important to our residents and get on with fixing our infrastructure. The consultation document we are adopting today is based on the budget proposal agreed by the governing body in December. We have had to make a few changes given the circumstances we find ourselves in. We have proposed some changes to the annual budget to respond to the recovery efforts required as a result of the storms we have had in the last 2 weeks and what may come in the future. Unfortunately, the time frame for adopting our annual budget cannot change. We have to get this done now and out for consultation. This will give the maximum amount of time for us to get feedback on the proposed budget. We can then debate and discuss the final details of our annual budget and make the right decisions for Auckland. We don't know what all the storm-related costs will be for some time yet, but they will be significant. Staff are working hard to ensure the storm-related repair and recovery activity in this financial year is able to be managed as far as possible within the existing budgets and through accessing the existing Climate Change Response Fund, insurance proceeds, waka kotahi and other government funds, as well as any spare capital in our current capital program. I have proposed a new $20 million a year fund for storm response activities starting in 2023-24 annual budget. That is in this consultation document. This will allow operating budget for proactive and reactive responses, meaning we are better prepared for future storm events. We need to do things like more catchment cleaning, street cleaning, overland flow path management, and more stream and culvert maintenance. Then we need to prepare more for helping people if adverse events occur. These are the things we need to prioritise. We do need to deal with the underinvestment in stormwater infrastructure over the years. What I can see is that Council has been spending money on the public stormwater assets but not doing much on the issues on private land. What we now know about stormwater is that it needs a fully functioning network approach which includes private land. We need to focus more on hydraulic capacity. That means being able to deal with more water flows at a bigger scale. This will need more funding for the capital program. It could be more than double what we spend now, and that will be something I want to consider as part of the long-term plan. For now, work should start on how to redirect some CapEx from the proposed annual budget to start the planning and consenting work. We also need to look very hard at where houses are built, especially where intensification is being enabled in areas without adequate stormwater infrastructure. We've known for a long time that climate change was going to raise these issues, and we cannot hide from that reality now. That is likely to come at a cost to Council and central government. Last year, the Council consented 2,358 buildings in hazard zones, including floodplains and flood-prone areas. Not all of these buildings will cause problems. Some may be perfectly sensible, but it is a concerning figure, and we need to investigate it. I'm not convinced that our current plans have adequately grappled with the problem, especially where the Environment Court or government has imposed changes on us. We need to look at that. Regional grants. Staff have done some further work on this since the initial mayoral proposal was adopted in December last year. What they have found is that the real level of regional contestable grants that are available to consider or that could be reduced is nearer to $3 million, not $8 million. The remaining $5 million is already committed for regional activity and was beyond the savings we looked at in December. So we are only looking for $3 million of savings. While the savings target for this proposal has reduced from 130 million to 125 million, this does not mean that there aren't other savings to be found. And I'm challenging management to do that across council and the CCOs. Every dollar saved could be redirected to higher impact spending like stormwater. We know that Aucklanders want their infrastructure to work. My proposal in these minor but important changes is still the right mix of levers to address our budget palette challenge, which has not gone away. If anything, it will be worse. The budget consultation process provides an opportunity for the public or any other interested parties to give feedback and or raise their concerns about the impact of these proposals. Today is not about revisiting the budget proposal. That has already been agreed with the addition of the Storm Response Fund, the only change. Today is about approving the consultation document itself. We have some tough choices ahead, and the consultation process will inform any final decisions. I'm going to ask Peter, Ross and Tamsis to take us through the report before questions, but before I do that, I will move the recommendations and ask for a seconder. Do I have a seconder for the recommendation?
I will second, Your Worship.
Second that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Peter, Ross and Tamsin. In that order, or whatever?
Thank you, Your Worship. I shall introduce and pass across. As councillors know, the proposed budget aims to address an estimated budget shortfall of 295 million, while continuing to prioritise services that Aucklanders need and value. It has been produced under immense time pressure and also under the impact of unprecedented events. This is not the long-term plan, and there are indications that the long-term plan will need to take some more medium-term views, but today we are focused on the annual budget. There are some tough choices ahead, and those tough decisions for councillors are no easier given the unprecedented storm events that we have had, but they will be informed by the consultation process. The recent weather events that have hit our region have made dealing with the financial situation an even more significant challenge. They've also demonstrated how important council is and the need for us to be an enduring organisation. I would reiterate that there is no free lunch in any budget. Less costs reduced means more rates, or it means more debt, and debt is really just delayed rates. An absolute stake in the ground is maintaining our commitment to being fully funded depreciation by 2028, and while it seems like a technical accounting aspect, it shows that we're managing with financial prudence over the medium to long term and it becoming a sustainable organisation, or maintaining that strength of a sustainable organisation. You've heard about the need within this next budget to bring forward some asset renewal spending and some reprioritisation due to late indications from the storm response, and also that need to increase our operating budgets by around 20 million next year for the ability to prepare for and respond to future storms in the short term while we go through the long-term plan implications. So with that brief opening, I shall pass across to the team to work through in more detail.
Thank you, Peter, and tēnā koutou katoa, and Mayor, Councillors and Independent Māori Statutory Board members. So this procedural report on today's agenda provides an overview of the annual budget process that we have undertaken since late last year, through to the drafting of consultation material and adoption today. It provides detail on the advice that has been provided to date, as well as decisions that were made in December that provided the basis for the drafting of our consultation material. In my report, I note that since decision making in December, several changes have been made, as indicated previously, as a result of further work from staff. This includes a reduction of the total amount of regional contestable grants proposal from 8 million to 3 million, a reduction to the total amount of overall group operating savings from 130 million to 125, and further detail on the implications of the TAU operating reduction proposal. These items were discussed at the workshop on Friday and are highlighted in the recommendations in front of you today, as well as a memo that is attached to my report. As a result of the recent storm events, as Peter just indicated, we have also included commentary on the potential financial implications and options for response to these events within the material. This was also discussed at the workshop on Friday, and a memo was also circulated that is attached to my report as well. During last Friday's workshop, we received feedback from you that focused on the local board funding proposal, as well as the feedback form. As a result, we have made amendments to the material to respond to that feedback, and this is included in the documents for adoption today that were distributed this morning. The documents for adoption include a placeholder for the summary of the Tupuna Authority Operational Plan, which was subject to decision making earlier in the meeting, local consultation material which was adopted by our 21 local boards last week, and the audited material relating to the potential amendment to our 10-year budget 2021 to 2031 to provide for the potential full or partial sale of our shares in Auckland International Airport. Since Friday's workshop, we have completed the audit process for the consultation material, and the unmodified audit opinion is now included in the consultation document. In the report, I also include detail on the important role the Audit and Risk Committee plays in monitoring and overseeing our risk and control processes relating to the annual budget and any amendments to that 10-year budget. Yesterday, the Audit and Risk Committee met and were provided with an update on the process for the development of the consultation material relating to that amendment, and they also received a confidential briefing from our auditors. I will ask Ross to talk to that once I've finished with this introduction. Finally, the recommendations in front of you today also include a delegation to the Mayor and Chief Financial Officer to make final changes if needed before we proceed with printing and distributing the material to support consultation that begins on the 28th of February, running through to the 28th of March. Kia ora, I'd now like to hand over to Ross.
Thank you. So as Tamsin has mentioned, the part of the consultation document that relates to the airport shares proposal needs to undergo a review by Audit New Zealand. So that review, as Tamsin said, has been completed and a clear audit opinion has been issued. It's now been incorporated, that opinion has been incorporated into the document. We've got Ethel Graham from Audit New Zealand online on the call, who's happy to answer any questions there might be around that opinion. The Audit and Risk Committee yesterday met to review the process around the audit and any key outstanding risks or issues associated with that. They resolved to advise the governing body there are no significant outstanding issues, and so you're all good to adopt this amendment to the LTP today. There was some concern expressed about just the wording of one pop-out box. Concern that if that was read in isolation as opposed to the rest of what was on the page there, some people might have a wrong understanding. We've worked through amendments to that text with the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, and that's been resolved and updated in the document. So that's and that is included in the documents that are ready for adoption, along with the final audit opinion. So the process is completed, and you're all good to adopt that amendment alongside the annual budget. We're happy to take any questions around the budget documents or the process. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I do have questions from Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Your Worship. In the material that we're looking at, the only thing that has really changed for me, and as a direct result of the crisis we've been through, is the importance of our citizens' advice bureaus. And I wondered whether there is any information you can provide on changes for the funding of citizens' advice bureaus.
For a response from management to that?
At the moment, there's no change to the advice. The proposal is to go out for consultation. There is ample room for the Citizens Advice Bureau and any other member of the public to provide feedback on that, and that's stuff that can be considered when you make final decisions in May, June.
Okay, did you hear that?
I heard that. I don't like that. I think we need them at the moment, and we need them on our side.
Well, I'm open-minded about that, but I'm reasonably sure that there will be strong consultation on that. Councillor Ferry.
Kia ora, thank you. I have two questions. First is a follow-up actually to Councillor Fletcher's point regarding the CAB. Can we ensure, please, that they are included in the stakeholder consultation process? And the other question is regarding the questions on page 94. And I'd like to foreshadow here that I'll be putting forward an amendment to 2 of the questions there. But in the first instance, I wanted to get some advice from staff as to the questions that start. So they're on the second half of the page and they're in that optional demographic information. Do you pay rates to Auckland Council, and what is your yearly household income before tax? I'd like to understand the purpose of these 2 questions. How are they supposed to inform our decision making? Are we supposed to take feedback from people on higher incomes, less or more importantly, and on the basis of whether or not people think they pay rates? And is there any particular advice around whether the rates, do you pay rates question is actually going to be answered well? Because I think a lot of people may feel that they do pay rates indirectly through rent or through other means. So if we just get some advice from staff around those 2 questions in particular, and how they sort of will fit into informing good decision making by us when we consider what we've heard through consultation. Thank you. And just foreshadowing, I have an amendment on both of those, which is already with Sandra. Thank you.
She should give you a...
Kia ora, Councillor. This is Anton Griffith, the Auckland Insights Manager, if I can speak through the chair to that point. In terms of what we can use that information for, certainly I wouldn't place more emphasis on one particular income group, but it does give you the ability to be able to look at the results and say, have we received a broad feedback from a broad swath of the community, or is this group that have submitted predominantly from higher income groups or from middle income groups and missing out lower income groups? It would also give us the ability to compare on that aspect with the independent survey, which does collect that information. So we would be able to sort of use those 2 bits of feedback from the public and say, interpret them with in mind how that reflects our broader community. In terms of how well that will be understood, we have endeavoured to make it very clear in that question that if you are a renter only, you are not a ratepayer. We did take that question through cognitive testing. So that's putting it to real members of the public and interviewing them about how they understood it. And we believe that we have got it as good as we can get it without someone verbally explaining. But it is possible that someone may misinterpret it. And I think in terms of why it was added, I think that this is something we've worked on and explored with the Mayor's office, but it does give you that ability to see which parts of the community have submitted through the statutory process.
Thank you for those answers. Mr. Mayor, would you like to do the amendment now, or shall we wait until we get to the debate? I'm happy to take your lead on that. Indeed, you need to.
I'm advised by Sandra that procedurally we should wait and get the discussions on the whole document, and then you can propose your amendment later on, if that's all right.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you. And I reserve the right to speak to it at that time. Thank you.
That's good. Councillor Lee, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, have staff taken on board the concerns raised by the Aotea Great Barrier Local Board and the Waiheke Local Board about the inequity of the cuts and how those cuts affect the island communities?
Not yet.
So in terms of thinking about equity of local board funding, that's a matter that needs to be resolved through the local board funding policy, which is that's outside the scope of this annual budget. It is in the scope of the board, and that can be looked at through the LTP. In terms of the feedback, in terms of representing, the 16 million cut, there was concern expressed that the finance was to reclaim it, so we've updated the content in the LTP to acknowledge the impacts and clearer about that. So we've updated around the budget. Issues around board funding will be resolved.
And may I add, Mr. Mayor? May I add a comment, Mr. Mayor? May I add a comment, please?
There is nothing but static for me.
Down to further inequities of the islands. I can't hear you, Councillor Lee.
I have turned my mic off to ensure that there's clarity for other speakers. Ross's answer wasn't particularly legible, but I want to make another point here, and that is I want to lodge a strong protest at the failure of management to provide the councillors, at least the members of the Expenditure Control Committee, with spreadsheets of OPEX and CAPEX to enable us to make a decision as we're required to under Section 76 and 77 of the Local Government Act. I want to make that point very, very strongly. Months have gone by and management have stubbornly refused to disclose that information.
Thank you. Councillor Darby.
Thanks, Mayor. Appreciate that. Just going to, I've got two areas I want to explore. Just focus me on the airport consultation. In the first instance, can I go to page 88, bottom left-hand side, where we discuss the interest saving sensitivity? On that, can I ask staff, are the staff confident that that particular very small section, and that relates to interest saving sensitivity related to share price growth or the share price going backwards, possibly? Are staff confident that that is clear to the reader, that it's transparent, that it conveys the history of growth in the share price, and just in the last 2 months where our shareholding has gone from 1.9, which is mentioned in the papers, to something like 2.26 billion. So that's an increase of 320 million, I think, approximately. Are staff confident that we are being very clear about that? I'm struggling to read that clarity. And the second part to that, Mayor, is we still mention the value of our 18.09% as of last June at 1.9, where it's currently, and we have this information because you can just check the share price, at well over 2 billion at 2.2 and something. Can staff just respond to me, please, Mayor?
Yep, happy to. So we've looked at this extensively and to see whether we've been clear enough with the information as well disclosed. All of these things, have to have a point in time estimate, and then we've made some assumptions at points in time. It was when, for the share price, it was when we provided the advice through to the governing body. So we've disclosed when that share price was set, the sensitivity around it, and what are the impacts if interest rates, share price, and other things move. That's been a key focus of the audit process. The Audit New Zealand Office Auditor General have carefully considered, have we been clear enough? Are we disclosing those risks and sensitivities well? And the final outcome of that review is yes, this is appropriate and fit for consultation. So we're very confident we've been through a robust process, and those things are as clear as they need to be. There is further information, including the share price chart of the history and the supporting information. So there's this, combined with what's here in the supporting information, provides ample disclosure and clarity for the public.
Okay, just to follow up on that, Mayor, so there's no room to update those numbers to what that our holding in that company is as of end of January, for example. There's no room to do that because it just seems hardly relevant, the price of the shareholding and the situation as of what was it, end of June last year. Is there no room to update? Should we not do that, Ross?
Not at this point. We've completed the audit process. The audit opinion has been issued already. If we looked at update it in January, then it'll be different in February. It'll be different again when we get to consultation. The share price moves on a daily basis. Could go up, could go down. So what's important here is we carefully disclose what assumptions we've made, what are the risks and sensitivities, and the view is we've done that adequately. So too late to make sort of adjustments at this point in the process, and things will continue to change.
Okay, thanks, Ross. Thanks, Mayor. Mayor, I'll come back with a second question around the stormwater after others. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turner?
No, I have my hand up. I'm sorry.
Question yet. Councillor Darby. No, you've just done Councillor Darby.
Yeah, he's got another question.
Oh, you got another question, Councillor Darby. We'll do the stormwater one now.
Okay, coming to the stormwater one, I'll just grab my notes here. How is this proposed budget informed by any data from the flood event, including identification of, the areas where we may have debris or cause damage, related to loss of life, injury, loss of property, etc. I'm just very conscious that, yes, there is a need for infrastructure, but we can't lose sight of our underinvestment in being proactive. And Mayor, you actually talked about, we need to address where houses are built, and we need to look at hazard zones, which is something I mentioned at last week's planning committee meeting. But of course, I can't see anywhere in this budget allocation any money going to the planning or regulatory areas to address those two matters that you addressed, Mayor. So I'm in the first instance, can I hear from Chief of Strategy on how the development of this $20 million spend is informed by the planning lens and the regulatory lens? Can I hear from the Chief of Strategy in the first instance, please?
Through the chair, kia ora koutou. I think this is just a very recent development, obviously, that has been proposed by the Mayor, Councillor Darby, and so I believe there'll be a next step over the next couple of months to perhaps help identify what this money could be used for, and whether it is in pure infrastructure terms, or whether it is more also around the resilience around planning and regulatory work that as you and the Mayor have referenced already today. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Megan. Mayor, I'm just wondering whether this can be worded in such a way that it does encompass other areas and not just hard infrastructure. I'm assuming it includes soft infrastructure as well. But we passed a motion, I think it was unanimous last week at Planning Committee, and that asked our staff to go away and look at the land use implications, etc., and investigate the regional and localised impacts of the flooding, implications for land use planning, regulatory plan changes, infrastructure and other policy settings. So I'm just wondering how we can word what the $20 million is going to be applied to in a way that allows the eventual allocations to be informed by that work. At the moment, I think it's restricted. So is there a way to word this so that it can reflect on the work that we've given some urgency to at the Planning Committee last week? Who could fetch that? Is that for you, Megan, or somebody else?
No, I think that's for Ross to respond to, and trying to get exact numbers at a time like this is, of course, difficult. There's only a certain amount of money that can be spent in certain times as well. Some of it is for immediate and obvious repairs. Some of the planning stuff, there's a capability within Megan's staff to do a lot of the planning stuff anyhow. But I'll get Ross to run through his version of it, but that's my understanding of it. And also it's a statement that we're serious.
Yes, as the Mayor said, it's very early days yet to understand the full financial impact. So that's why on page 2 in a large box, we've kind of got the storm event box that says it's too early to calculate the specific financial impacts. And so we're focused on identifying key things that might change. So all we can do in the consultation document at the moment is signal that change will happen. In terms of the proposed 20 million of additional OPEX, we have kept that very general. And we've said that the primary focus is about building our capability to prepare for and respond to future storm events. It gives some examples of what it might be spent on, but it's worded in a way that is very general. It isn't definitive about what are the specific things. So we think there is ample scope of what that money could be used for. The reality is it's going to take time to work through that, and we'll have to do some further work on that, have further discussions and decision making, and that will be as part of the final annual budget. So there is ample scope to accommodate all the things that you're talking about in due course, but it's too early to be definitive on that right now.
I think Councillor Darby, this will be informed by lots of work, including the planning process. Plus, there is. I'm involved in quite a lot of central government negotiations. We're not quite sure how much we're going to get from them towards us as well. So it was a sum that seemed reasonable enough to make good start on the work and inform us for a fair while until the picture becomes clearer. I think there's a national picture which is going to inform this as well at the moment. So we're happy with that as being a sufficiently large sum to certainly make a dent in things.
Okay, look, thanks, Mayor. I know the intent, and I totally support you with the intent, and it's necessary. And if I could just suggest that as you use your authority to, edit the document possibly along with the Deputy Mayor, maybe we just make sure those words leave open the opportunity of the funding being allocated to the very things that the investigation reveals. Thank you.
And lastly, of course, we will have more information on this by the time we actually set the budget after the consultation. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, two questions. Mine's very similar to Councillor Darby's, but I was going to ask for clarification from staff on when we'd be looking at work programs for that storm response fund, which I fully support, by the way. And, you know, if we can, what committee that will come through.
I think the governing body.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. As you know, it's very difficult to understand how long this piece of string is, and we were well on train to understand the impacts from 27 January at the high level until Cyclone Gabrielle turned up, unfortunately, and has created an overlay on top of that. I don't want to commit to a time frame that I can't meet. We're all working at pace. Initially on the response. The response has to be the focus. There's no point the financial accountants, such as myself, getting stuck in demanding answers on cost lines at this point. But we are pulling that together, and I do think we will have information at the end of consultation, which will help us guide our path forward. I expect, given the various roles of the committees, that it's likely to come to governing body in the first instance, and as a high level financial impact.
Cool, thank you. I've got another question. Tātaki Auckland Unlimited, I just note under C there, a material reduction in TAU's visitor attraction activities. Do we have any more information that you can share with us today on that?
So there's information in the memo that's been distributed. There's more information in the consultation document and the supporting information. There is a section there, a couple of pages on that, and we've got Justine, the CFO from TAU online, I believe. Might be able to answer any specific questions.
Yes, she is.
Justine, did you want to comment?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much for the question. Essentially the extra reduction of 27.5 million on top of the 17 that was already built into the budget will mean a total reduction of 44 million. That will mean substantially looking at the subsidised access provided to community facilities and regional facilities that are currently free to the public, so we'll be having to look at pricing models to go with those. There will also be very little to no budget available to attract major events for Tamaki Makaurau from 2024 onwards, so that will have impact in terms of international visitor attractions, business events and international student programs. Additionally, the expectation is that we will have very little or no economic development activity available unless we can find alternative funding streams.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have no more questions up at the moment, so Councillor Ferry, would you like to come forward with your amendment, please?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So the amendment is very straightforward, just to seek the removal of the two questions that I highlighted to members before. Removal of the one that begins, do you pay rates, and the one, what is your yearly household income before tax? And just to speak to that amendment briefly, I think that these two questions are not questions that we have asked in the past, and I think there was a good reason for that. I don't see that they bring any value to our consideration, and indeed they could skew our perceptions of some of the feedback that we receive. We should be treating all submitters, regardless of whether they pay rates or not, or what type of rates they pay, as legitimate, and not weight some more than others. And the same with sources of income, levels of household income. So I'm very dubious about the value of these two questions, and put forward this amendment, hopefully for your support, to remove them from the consultation document at this point. Thank you very much.
Okay, Shane Henderson is a seconder. Would you like to speak to this, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree completely with what Councillor Ferry has said. When we're asking any questions on a consultation document, we need to be able to clearly justify them. We want to, ask as less as possible as we can, so that we're getting that really quality information back. but also we're not creating barriers for communities to participate. I'm concerned that when they read that question, there'll be people out there that are concerned, that don't want to share that kind of information and will throw the whole thing away. The flip side to that is we need to justify why we're asking these things. And we did ask earlier today, and I do appreciate the answer from staff, but personally, I feel that that is not sufficient to include these questions in there. When you look at it, you're not going to be using either of these questions to weight the submissions that you get back. You're not going to read them in light of the answers to these questions, and just taking them in turn. Paying rates to Auckland Council, I mean, everyone pays rates. Some people pay them directly, some people pay them indirectly. And then adding to that is that the majority of our income is non-rate revenue, of which, that's non-discriminatory. Everyone pays their tickets to buses and pools and all that kind of stuff. So yes, we all fund the council. We just do it in different ways. Secondly, the yearly household income. I do think that is personal information for people that people particularly find uncomfortable to talk about. And the flip side is, as I've just said, their yearly income is not going to affect the validity of their submission at all. And so on that basis, I think we should be deleting both of these guys and just going with a clearer ask for the public so we can get as many submissions as possible. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Simpson, please.
Your Worship, I have a question on the amendment just before I form my view. Staff, can anyone tell me, do we have any evidence or otherwise that landlords have been passing on any rent rises through to any rates rises through to renters or not? Is that anecdotal, or do we have any evidence one way or the other?
Tenancy Tribunal allow that as a contributing piece of information. But
so
Andrew?
All the economics suggests, and all the economics and all the evidence suggests that land prices and house prices are not affected by land taxes, including rates. They're a very small proportion of the value of property, about 0.0017% for the general rate. And rents are driven by supply and demand, not by underlying costs at present. As we can see in the market's response to higher interest rates, there's a higher cost, but prices have come down.
Thank you.
Councillor Newman, are you there?
Yeah, look, I mean, Your Worship, I'm not going to support the amendment. I'm happy with the question. I mean, ultimately, the feedback from Aucklanders forms part of my judgment, but my constituents elect me to exercise my good judgment, not act solely on the basis of a quantitative survey. I'm a landlord. I don't pass on the rate increase. I don't get my tenants to pay the rates at all, because ultimately I treat the rates as a cost of the property and claim it back through my tax return. Yes, some landlords may pass on that cost and some clearly don't. But I think that there's nothing in this question that necessarily precludes people who are not property owners from participating in these surveys. It is a question that exists. Some people will answer it, some people won't. It's just not a material enough issue from my perspective, although I do appreciate that some people feel differently. I just think that this particular survey needs to be informed by the advice that's been received to date. People wanted a quantitative survey. Part of the consideration for a quantitative survey, I would have thought, would be to understand precisely broadly understand that the circumstances of the people who are contributing their answers to that survey to ensure that you get a good snapshot of Aucklanders who are contributing their feedback.
Deputy Mayor, you're back up again.
No, Your Worship, I just had that question, that's all.
Okay, my apologies. It must have been something with the computer here. Councillor Hills, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be supporting both amendments. I think they are irrelevant to the information we need. I do worry, the feedback I get often with both voting for local government and participating in these, that you have to be a ratepayer. So even though these questions are optional, I think they do lead people to potentially switch off or not think that this survey is from them. Like Councillor Henderson said, much of the majority of our income is not from rates, so we need to consider a broader way of asking how people pay. On the quantitative survey, we're still doing the Kantar survey, and that's completely anonymous. I do know that if this is reported back, the spreadsheets, I assume or I hope, would remove this, but it still means the council system has that sort of information on people, whereas a Kantar survey is completely separated and doesn't come back to us with names and that sort of information. So I just think that it's not helpful, and I don't think is that inclusive, those questions. So I think they shouldn't be on there. But yeah, thank you.
Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. If these questions are aimed at, acquiring data that's useful, then I can see some information here that may be useful to us in analysing, who is taking part in these feedback forms. And I take it in the first instance, if people don't want to answer those questions, they don't answer them. There's no little red asterisk that doesn't allow you to proceed to the next question if you don't answer one. So I'm assuming that's the case. It may even be worthwhile to make it clear that people don't have to answer questions, and that may be in the form as well. As far as the data that may or may not come from it, I think it is useful to know these two elements, but particularly if, as Councillor is saying, there already is a view that this is a survey or concerns for ratepayers only. I think people that are renting, which is a huge part of our population now, unfortunately, in terms of the declining home ownership rates, then if that perception exists, then we should be doing our level best to actually remove that view insofar as it may exist, because that's not helpful. And I'm assuming this sort of data in terms of collating the status of people, both in terms of their income and in their rating, ratepayer status, is actually useful. If, for instance, it came in that there's entirely disproportionate number of people who are ratepayers responding to council survey as opposed to people who aren't, then we have got an issue, because people do pay for their rates whether they rent or not, because I'm sure landlords, or enough landlords, will incorporate the rate component or increases when they do their rent reviews. Certainly, when I listen to landlords talk, they talk about the rising cost of living, and council rates is always something that gets chucked in there. So that is providing useful information in my view. If people do object to it, and I could see circumstances where people may say, well, what I earn is none of your business, then as long as it's clear they don't have to reply to that, then fair enough. But if it helps inform that profile of who's involved in this, I see that being helpful, and helpful for the very reasons that some of the people are objecting to this. Thank you.
Mike Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a couple of issues that have been raised here. They relate to privacy of citizens, and also there's an aspect of equity or equality. And I understand the mover and seconder's concerns about discriminating between technically between ratepayers and people who are can only be renters. And the fact of the matter is, whether they pay rates directly, the rental dwelling would not work unless the renter paid enough money to the landlord for the landlord to pay the rates on it. So if we look at our own community groups, we can take a lead. In the past, some years ago, quite a long time ago, local community groups were called Ratepayers Association. The community has dispensed with that name just about right across the region and across the country to residents. And I think if there are concerns here on privacy and equity, I think we should take those concerns on board. When it comes to asking people about their income, refer to my earlier comments about the refusal of council management to allow us to have a look at OPEX and indeed the income of our senior managers. So, you know, I think we need to think about this. I can understand, it's not a big issue for me, but I can understand the concerns of the people who want this amendment.
Okay, that's what I've got. I'll just sum up a little bit. I'm neutral about this. I thought the point was to ensure that we had a good cross-section of people. Similarly for ages, I mean, some of us don't really want to have our age known either, but the point we do that is so we don't find that only young people or only old people fill out the form. We don't want to find that only wealthy people or only poor people fill out the form. I didn't think it was for any other reason, but if it upsets people, we just want them to come back, I think. I'm not fussed about, I don't know why we want to know whether a person is neither female nor male, what we learned from that either, but I thought this was just so that our people could ensure that we had a good cross-section of everybody. I don't expect that we're going to be publishing anybody's income, and it's optional. I don't think I'll declare my age actually in case I get discriminated against, and I'm not quite sure of my gender. I used to think I knew that, but so I'm very neutral on this. I'm quite happy to just put the thing. Actually, I think we've been. I just be careful what you wish for, though. If we find that we've only got wealthy Pākehās responding to this, you won't know that. I'm prepared to put it. I think it should go to a.
You can go to division if you want, or just put it.
So I'll put it and see whether we get it, but it sounds like a division thing to me because I've had people before and against it talking, so probably best to do.
I'll call a division, Your Worship. It's Councillor Newman.
Yeah, that's good. Right, I'm going to ask Sandra to go through this, please. Just call out. We're going to say you're either yes, you're in favour of the proposal, or no, you're not. Or you can abstain if you don't care.
Councillors, you're voting on Councillor Ferry's amendment. Councillor Baker.
No.
Councillor Bartley.
Yeah.
Councillor Dalton. For. Councillor Darby.
For.
Councillor Ferry.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
No.
Councillor Foley.
For.
Councillor Henderson.
For.
Councillor Hills.
Aye. Thank you.
IMSB member Kake.
For.
Councillor Lee.
Aye.
Councillor Leone.
For.
Councillor Newman.
Against.
Councillor Sayers.
Against.
Deputy Mayor Simpson.
Against, but I'm against for I, Roman numeral I, but number 2, I'm ambivalent. I'll abstain on that.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Against.
AMSB Chair Taipere.
For.
Councillor Turner.
Against.
Councillor Walker.
No.
Councillor Watson.
Against.
Councillor Williamson.
Against.
Mayor Brown.
I'll abstain. I don't care.
So that is carried 11 votes to 10 with 1 abstention. So we now go back to the substantive for debate.
Right, we're going back to the substantive issue, which was passing the entire shooting box. Is there any further debate on this? We have debated it already.
Councillor Newman. Councillor Newman.
Councillor Newman.
Well, briefly, Your Worship, it's very important that the budget goes out for consultation, but I just want to signal that there will need to be further negotiation in relation to the scope of the OPEX savings and precisely where they come from. I'm also very concerned to ensure that the budget for stormwater, which you've indicated, which I strongly support, needs to be a governing body budget decision in the first instance, because ultimately I see this matter as being one of a step change around CapEx, but more importantly, a budget for renewal of infrastructure, as well as the consequential OPEX cost for the renewal of that infrastructure, which ultimately needs to be funded through rates. And that's not really a planning decision, actually. That has to be a budget decision. So when we get more information around this needs to be informed by where those budget bids have come from Healthy Waters over the last few years, both those lines that got above the line from the ELT as well as those that fell below the line, because it's quite clear that there have been significant issues with respect to stormwater maintenance. But also, Your Worship, I just want to signal my very strong view that as well as the consequential OPEX savings are going to need to be found, and I don't want them to just be found through regional grants. I think that those people who are on the highest salaries in the organisation need to be part of the OPEX savings, and the Chief Executive is going to have to reflect on that, because it's essential to sustaining support from my constituents to ensure that all parts of this council are part of the savings. But also the CapEx reprioritisation, which will need to be addressed through the long-term plan, a very significant chunk of which comes from Auckland Transport. And I just need to signal, Your Worship, my expectation that the Board of Auckland Transport is not going to need to get right in behind and cooperate with the savings that we will require, because a lot of the savings that we will require are going to require people to give up what they consider to be incredibly important in the AT CapEx space in order to fund some of this very important renewal work which needs to be happening, the majority of which needs to be happening in the road corridors, not exclusively, but a lot of it has to happen in the road corridors, because that's where the stormwater infrastructure is. And finally, Your Worship, with respect to the airport shares, I most certainly be putting my hand up for that matter to go out for consideration, because ultimately I in my own life wouldn't be buying shares in Auckland Airport because they don't return a dividend. And if I'm not prepared to do that in my own private life, then I have to reflect very carefully on whether I ask my constituents to continue to pay the interest costs in order to hold these shares which are not paying a dividend. And in the years when they have paid a dividend, I point out that the dividend has been taken as opposed to being taken in the form of share offers, which is one of the reasons why our share portfolio has been declining over time. So thank you, Your Worship, for putting up the draft budget. It's very difficult, but I do want to support this budget going out for more consultation. And I do want to put the Chief Executive and the Chief Financial Officer on notice. My expectation for sustaining support for this budget is we will need to have a further negotiation over precisely where some of these OPEX savings will come this year, as well as foreshadowing the CAPEX savings that will need to come as part of the long-term plan debate, which we had shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Walker, please.
Sure. I'd like to agree with all of the statements that Daniel Newman just made. My support for the budget and what we go out for is very conditional on councillors receiving information at a much more granular level across both the organisation, that's Auckland Council, and the council organisations. I would suggest in this budget there will be many Aucklanders wanting to see what the line-by-line expenditures are across renewals, across transport, across stormwater, and they won't be able to find them because they don't have access to them, and neither do we. So if ever there was a time for us to be much more transparent around the provision of information, especially for councillors who need to make the hard calls, then that is now. And I agree with the comments that Councillor Newman made around oversight, around the expenditure we've got on salaries and the like. Yes, I think it's great to have the 20 million around stormwater response, but let's have more oversight on what we're actually spending across the council group and the council controlled organisations on that, and any number of areas where we need to find savings, and we need to find them soon. And in that respect, I know that my fellow councillor Maurice Williamson has been seeking the same information and thus far has not received it. That's my understanding. If Mr. Williamson might want to confirm that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Henderson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of brief points for me. So thank you to the staff. I want to just acknowledge the finance staff that have worked so hard on this. You know, in the previous term as Deputy Chair of the Finance Committee, I saw firsthand just how hard they worked on a normal budget, not that we had many of those. But with the storm compounding everything, you guys have had to pull in some extremely long hours. So we all really appreciate your work on this. I just want to be very clear that this vote is not a vote to approve the budget itself in terms of its content. It's to improve the consultation document going out to the residents so that they can have their say, and the democratic mandate that we have passes to them, in my view. And I actually want to really commend the questions in this budget that give that flexibility, that allow people to share whether they think service levels are too high or too low, whether our revenue is too high or too low, in a way that maybe we haven't done before, with a level of detail and a level of flexibility that we haven't had. So I'm actually really excited for the consultation period and getting out into those communities and talking to them about the budget. But, you know, my phone has been rung off the hook about this since December. And as I've said before, the Waitakere community is incredibly passionate and incredibly concerned about the public services and the operating savings that are proposed in this budget. I won't need to talk about that too much because that's for another day. But I commend the questions that we're asking, and I'm also glad to see the Storm Response Fund put in there. I think that's a really good move. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, everybody.
Councillor Turner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to everyone who's done this work. I do support Daniel Newman's comments. He says them more eloquently than me. The public want change, and we keep hearing about underinvestment. There's not underinvestment. Money's not getting to the right places, and I don't think that these questions and these abilities to respond to really cover that properly. Although I'm really only just stating that for the record, because you know we've got to move forward with something. But we have got, we have got huge under-delivery by this organisation. and you know, it's not as though we're up to a line in the sand or something. That line just got washed away by the last storm, and the people, the evidence of underinvestment in these areas, or under getting the money, the correct money to the ground, is just evident to everybody. So I really think that there is significant change to be made here, and the people, you know, see it around the budget. We need to show it through the budget. So yeah, I'll support this going forward. It does worry me though about, I've been in these situations before on the local board where all of a sudden we're told, well, that submission and that submission are out of scope, so we won't take any notice of those. And I think that's my concern. Just what I'm trying to raise here is that because we haven't been given the data, you know, I just can't get over those figures of 229 million other expenditure, operating expenditure, 1.944 billion for the group, and you know, the contracts, the full facility contracts, they're almost invisible to us. And these are the places where the public can see the poor outcomes, and we can't see where our money's being spent in there. And I believe there's huge savings and things that could be done inside there. So yeah, I'm just stating right now that when we come to this debate, I will be coming to it with other ideas, and I think things will have changed by the time we get there too. Thank you.
Councillor Watson, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be supporting the budget going out for consultation, and certainly commend your lead in putting something together in these very difficult and changing times. Unprecedented seems to be a word that we've heard a lot of in the last 3 years, but things just keep rolling along. And in that respect, in terms of going out to consult and then eventually make decisions, the robustness of the consultation and the rigor of the decision then is often only as good as the information that informs. We are putting information out to the public, and I'm hopeful that a good proportion of them will at least read the summary documents or try and educate themselves further in terms of any points they should or shouldn't be making. In terms of the information that comes to us, Mr. Mayor, unfortunately, I must echo the sentiments of some of my colleagues here in terms of the continued failure, it would seem, to provide all the financial information that has been requested for the Finance and Expenditure Committee. That is concerning, Mr. Mayor. I note or compare the approach taken by the Rodney District Council, which wasn't a council known for its openness and transparency, but in come budget times, there was a breakdown, line by line breakdown of all manner of cost centres within that council organisation. So that's being requested, has been requested on numerous times now by numerous individuals, numerous councillors. So that's certainly going to be an important condition of any decision I make or don't make, based on the availability of that information in the first instance to the committee, and then secondly to the councillors as a whole. In that respect, I'd contrast, some of the, rather predictable nickel and diming on deeply unpopular and important parts of council's operations, closing libraries for one day, or cuts to CAB, or environmental grants where volunteers are clearing streams and whatnot. We seem to have got down to quite some detail very quickly on that, as opposed to some of the big cost centres within council, which we have very little insight or transparency over. So I'm trusting that will be addressed. Time's ticking on that one. We've been asking since November. We're going out for consultation and we still haven't got it. Finally, Mr. Mayor, as far as the airport shares go, I certainly will be endeavouring to keep an open mind on that, and will be informed by what members of the public say, and certainly I think in a debate that follows, depending on what that feedback is, there will have to be some analysis of conditions that we just don't result in the same situation we had when we disposed of the $330 million rainy day fund, the diversified assets fund, which just disappeared into the debt ether, and within a very short space of time the debt was back up and any gains in paying down debt was lost. So that's a discussion for another day. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for getting it to this stage, along with everyone who's been involved, and I'll certainly be taking keen interest in what people are saying. Thank you.
Councillor Ferry. Thank you very much, Councillor Watson.
Oh, kia ora, thank you. Just to very briefly say, I will be voting this through as the consultation document. Thank you to my colleagues for supporting the amendment. And I did just want to commend the staff. I know the timeframes on this were really tight, and at the same time we were responding to major civil emergency across the region, and I know a lot of staff were volunteering extra time to do things like be out at shelters and stuff while this was all going on in the background. I want to also acknowledge my councillor colleagues who have been in the same boat out there in evacuation centres and feeding information in through to log issues at the same time as we grappled with this. And so just wanted to speak to acknowledge that and say that what happens next in terms of the what we're told by our community from this process, I'm anticipating some quite significant changes to what we finally vote on as a result of what we hear from our community. So thank you for the opportunity. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Lotu Fuli.
Kia ora, thank you, Mayor. Like others, I understand that this vote is not about the budget and the content of the budget, but about getting this document out for consultation, and so I will be voting for it. And like everybody else, I want to lend my voice as well to commend the team and commend all of our council staff for getting it through in these tight timeframes and in these very unprecedented times as well. I do want to particularly thank our finance team who were able to turn over and make a change after our Audit and Risk Committee meeting, which was only yesterday. And I thank the team for working overnight with the chair of that committee, with Bruce, and putting that change through. And although it's not perfect, it is at least better than what it was. And so I'm grateful and thankful for that. I'm mindful, like everybody else, on many items there, especially on the cuts that we're asking from our communities and from our local boards in particular, especially as we've been on the ground and seen just how important our community groups and our local boards are when responding to these sorts of unprecedented times. And we know that with climate change, we're going to see much, much more of this. And this is probably our new normal going forward. So funding to communities are absolutely core to what we do as local government. So I'll be waiting keenly to see what our community tells us, and I'll be keeping an open mind until that consultation is concluded. But I thank you, Your Worship, for your leadership in this space as well, and I will be supporting this. Kia ora.
Fully, Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Mayor. Once again, this is just approving the questions. I'm keeping an open mind as well. There's clearly a budget hole to address, but do want to just point out that some of the debt and other things that get criticised were our choice. In the last 6 years, we increased our capital over 10 years from 18 billion to 32 billion. We chose to almost double our capital expenditure because of the issues we're facing right now. I think water infrastructure went from 5.5 billion in the 2015 budget to 11.1 billion in the 2021 budget, and transport almost doubled as well in that time. So we made a choice the last 6 years to dramatically increase borrowing and spending in those areas that the city has been demanding we do for decades. And clearly what the last few weeks has shown us is that we're still far behind, but we were starting to get on top of it, and there's good examples of that. The other issues are that, we all, and I hope we all, will listen to our communities, but also We're going to have to work together as a team if we want changes here. That, in my opinion, the cuts are dramatic. I feel the stress on top of our communities will be hard, but we need to stump up with, is that more rates? Is that more debt? Are we going to sell the airport shares or not? We cannot just piecemeal vote this through. So we're going to have to do our best, and I will be doing my best to focus on my own actions, to explain to the community what is the other option. It's all right for me to say these cuts are horrible, but I'm going to have to prove to my community that more rates, more debt, or sales of things are the way to go to prevent those cuts. So there will be a lot of conversations, no doubt, but it's about being responsible together. You know, like we did through COVID when we worked together unanimously on really tough stuff, we are going to have to try move forward together to change this budget or accept this budget, whatever the community tells us. There are things, sweeping statements around procurement. I wasn't on the procurement committee last term, but the details that are given, and I've read all the agendas, are quite significant. The chair and the members there got information every time, line by line, on all the information in those contracts, what are the status quo was, what you're getting out of them, how the savings can get there. Councillor Simpson and others through the Value for Money Committee did work to try and reduce many of those contracts. I think of insurance and IT and different things. So there is a lot of work going on. There are things that clearly we need more information on, but it's not, the transparency has been there on a lot of issues that kind of get thrown out of there. Tātaki Auckland Limited, I think just leaving that quite significant change out there in the open is significant. Who will take up that mantle in such a short time for our city when we need an economic recovery, we need arts, culture, events, we need those types of things to keep our community happy, improve their well-being, and through many of the contracts that are in there. So we were going to have to quickly look at how we're going to do that. When the Super City started 12 years ago, we had 10 million, I think, for major events a year, and this will take us down to nothing. So, you know, we need to keep in mind that we have always done these things and community may miss them when they're gone. So there's a long list of things I could talk about. We need to strengthen those, but we do need to show where the money's coming from if we don't want to. And I'm willing to do that, and I hope you all are too. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Darby, please.
Thank you. I'll just focus on two areas. As I mentioned before, I have concern about the wording around the stormwater 20 million. And look, if there's scope, Mayor, working with the Chief of Strategy and others to refine that just so that it can reflect the investigations that we're kicking off through Planning Committee last week, and making sure that communities of greatest need and areas of greatest need receive that funding. And look, just at a rough, I think we probably need to look at that 20 million and how it's allocated, and maybe there's a 2.5 into the plans and places team, water strategy implementation, looking at retreats, strengthening development rules. You know, we just have to look at that. So at the moment, that's not highlighted. Increased budget provision for emergency management activities, for example, we know that needs a big leg up. Catchment management planning. My understanding is that we stopped doing catchment management planning quite a few years ago. So, you know, do we need to invest in that area as well? As you want to do, Mayor, increased maintenance, yeah, that's all good, but focusing on where there's greatest risk of loss of life, of injury, damage to property, etc. Focusing on nature-based solutions, not losing sight of that. Stream daylighting, soft infrastructure, flood detention. We've done some good things in that area, but we need to accelerate in that area. So I would probably like to see the wording of this be reviewed, and Mayor and others, you've got delegated authority to do this. and then we can adjust those buckets that I've just mentioned, rather than putting it all into one bucket. The other area, Mayor, I just want to dwell on a little bit is, and I have real concern about this, and that is the requirement of Auckland Transport to make savings of $21 million, and really, I just the impact in the public transport area there worries me immensely. Yes, COVID has hit patronage. The bus driver shortage has hit patronage, and so too is the shortage of skippers and deckhands on ferries. Most impacted here by this budget is the ongoing reduction of public transport bus services. And I'm really concerned that resignation has set in, that we will not find bus drivers in the near future, medium future, or even the medium to long-term future. And I have fired some quite stern emails to Auckland Transport in the last week and a bit on this. It worries me immensely. If there's any one thing, well, there are many things in this budget to be concerned about, but one thing that worries me is how we appear to be stepping away from amping the public transport bus system up at a time we need to do that. We are stepping away, and there's some resignation setting in that we will not be finding those much needed bus drivers. I'll leave it at that, Mayor. Let's go and see what our communities think, but there are lots of issues to be focusing on there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Darby. I agree with everything you've said, particularly about the stormwater stuff there. And it's interesting that Auckland Transport have their rating engineers are in fact impeding the better performance of our stream daylighting. So things are complicated. I will take your advice with regard to carefully getting the wording right, because that's what I'm trying to do. Councillor Lee, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be supporting this and treating it as a procedural matter to enable a progress in our local government mandated annual plan. My vote should not be interpreted as a blank check supporting this budget, because I do not. I do not support the proposed sale of Auckland International Airport shares, and I yet again place on record my protest at the lack of detailed financial information, which is our right to demand as decision makers here. I agree with the comments about Auckland Transport, and I would go one step further, that Auckland Transport, which consumes some 70% of our expenditure, is failing in public transport and failing in other matters as well. And this, I think, we need to address. So on that note, I will conclude. Just one more point. The $295 million budget shortfall crisis we are facing is not a one-off. This is systemic in the system, and can only just bear in mind that last year there was $127 million shortfall, fortunately bridged over by a government handout somehow related to Three Waters. There is a systemic problem in our system which we are obliged to get to the bottom of, and not just sell our assets to fudge the whole question. We're here to sort it out, and this is what we need to do. And this is what I'll be telling people when I front this consultation in my community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. So I've got no more, so I'm just going to sum up a little bit here. I'm not mad about making cuts either, but there was a $295 million hole. And so I notice when we spend like mad, it's the council's budget, but when we've got to save money, it's the mayor's budget. This is the Mayor's budget because we've got to save money. I accept some of the other things. I look on page 46 and, you know, our operating costs have risen $278 million above the long-term plan, and they've gone $168 million from last year. I am yet to be convinced that management have extracted all of the savings that they can. If we can extract them there, it takes a bit of pressure off some of the things that the public obviously want. We have $924 million under growth on page 48, and yet there is no growth. So there are some big questions. We are where we are. This has got to be got out. We are asking the public to understand that we are in a rock and a hard place. And so thank you for all your stuff. We are now about to put the vote to take this thing to consultation. The consultation period will undoubtedly produce people who and responses that are at variance to what we are proposing. But you can't just want the things you want without giving up something or other else. That's the tricky part of this. So it's consultation. It's not a Christmas gift thing we're going for. So I'm now going to put the motion which has been proposed and seconded. I'll put it just to see whether I'll get a carry with ayes, otherwise we'll go to a whatchamacallit. All right, all those in favour, please say aye.
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 Aye. There's a lot of ayes there. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Jane, please record my abstention.
Councillor Fletcher?
Councillor Fletcher's abstaining. Not quite what that means, but good.
I don't have confidence.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. We've got a couple more things to go, which are not quite so contentious. I'm either we can proceed, but it's only 12:30, and so I'm going to push on. I'd like to thank all the staff involved in the work in getting that last thing ready. Nobody's really enjoying this. It's tough, but it's what we have to do, and we can't just put it off. That's quite clear. So the next thing we